So, my friend Mark and I have always been the biggest haters when it comes to ghosts. Yeah, we like them in our movies and scary stories, but that's all they were to us, was fiction. Not real, just good entertainment. We're both the type to go see the latest horror movie, but then brush off anything paranormal as just another story for the gullible. Well, a few nights ago though, we decided to put our skepticism to the test. There's this old cemetery on the edge of our town that's been there since the 1800s. People say it's haunted and full of ghosts, and we figured, why not check it out and prove them all wrong? We picked the perfect night. Overcast, a little windy, but no rain. We brought flashlights, but we did not want to look too obvious, so we mostly used our phone screens to light the way. The cemetery was dead quiet, no pun intended, and even though we expected it to be creepy, it was actually kind of peaceful at first. Just rows and rows of old gravestones, some of them so worn out you could barely read the names. We wandered around for a bit, making jokes about the spooky atmosphere, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. Then, around 3 a.m., things started to feel different. We were about to head back home when I got this weird feeling, like we were being watched. I know, it sounds cliche, but that's the only way I can describe it. It felt like eyes were burning into me from some dark part of the cemetery that I couldn't see. Mark must have felt it too because he got really quiet all of a sudden. Out of nowhere, we started hearing noises. At first, it sounded like the wind rustling through the trees, but then it got louder, like whispers, but too low to make out any words. We tried to play it cool, but I could tell Mark was just as freaked out as I was. We both checked our phones, and that's when we noticed the time. 3:33 a.m. As an avid horror fan, I knew this to be the devil's hour. And what was even stranger, our phone clock stayed on 3:33 a.m. Even after minutes of passing, the time did not change. We decided things were getting too weird, and it was time to leave. As we turned to go, something caught my eye. A couple of gravestones that we had not noticed before. They were right in the middle of our path we'd already walked down. I was wondering how these gravestones just appeared, when Mark pointed something out. He said, "Hey, those names." His voice was shaky. "Look at them." I shined my phone light on the first one. My stomach dropped. It had my name on it, full name, date of birth, and everything. The gravestone next to it had Mark's name, the same deal. We both stood there, absolutely perplexed. In my confusion, I switched to my camera on my phone and snapped some photos of the graves. Then we heard the whispers getting louder and heard twigs snapping, as if someone was walking towards us. We did not say another word, we just ran. When we finally got back to my house, we were too freaked out to sleep. We kept checking our phones, but the time did not budge from 3:33 a.m. until about an hour later when it suddenly jumped to 4:34 a.m. Neither of us could logically explain this. The next day though, curiosity got the better of us. We went back in broad daylight, thinking that maybe we'd see something we missed in the dark. But when we got there, the gravestones were gone. We retraced our steps over and over, but there was nothing. There were no signs that the gravestones with our names had ever existed. I pulled out my phone to look at the photos that I took of them the night before, and the photos were gone. I did not delete these, and they were just missing from my phone. Mark and I have yet to come up with a logically sound explanation for anything that happened that night. I may have not believed in the supernatural prior to this, but I'm strongly considering there is something else besides this natural world that we see. It was late, maybe a little after midnight, when I finally left the office. I was tired, but I figured the drive home would be a straight shot, with no traffic on the back roads. It was one of those pitch black nights where you could barely see beyond your headlights, and I just wanted to get home, maybe pour myself a drink, and crash on the couch. I was about 20 minutes from my house when it happened. The road was empty, nothing but trees and the occasional mailbox lining the sides. I was driving on autopilot, lost in my thoughts, when I suddenly saw her. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, standing right in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes so hard, the car screeched to a stop, just inches from hitting her. My heart was pounding, and for a second, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, what was a kid doing out here in the middle of nowhere at this time at night? I got out of the car, not really thinking, just acting on instinct. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out to her. She did not answer. Instead, she just turned and started walking toward the cemetery that was right off the side of the road. I didn't even know it was there until that moment. The girl did not run, did not even look back. She just walked, as if she knew exactly where she was going. I followed her, calling out again, but she did not respond. As soon as she entered the cemetery, she disappeared into the darkness between the gravestones. I hesitated for a moment, but something made me follow her. Maybe it was concern, or maybe it was just sheer curiosity. I walked into the cemetery, calling out, but all I heard was the wind rustling through the leaves. It was actually unnervingly quiet, and I started to regret getting out of my car. Just when I was about to turn back, I saw her again. This time, standing by an unmarked, freshly dug grave. I swear my blood ran cold. She was just standing there, looking down into the grave. I didn't even hear her approach. She was just suddenly there, like she materialized out of thin air. I walked closer, and she turned to look at me. Her eyes were dull, almost lifeless, and she said in the softest, most chilling voice, "Tragedy is coming your way." I don't know what overcame me, but I ran. I bolted back to my car without looking back, my heart racing like I was being chased by something. I fumbled with my keys, got the door open, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. I did not stop until I was in my driveway, and even then, I sat there in my car for a few minutes, trying to calm down. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about that girl, her voice, that grave. I tried hopelessly to convince myself that it was some weird, messed up dream, or that maybe I was just so tired that I imagined the whole thing. The next day, though, I got a call. My mom, she was in a car accident. She did not make it. Personally, I wasn't too close with my mom ever since she divorced my dad when I was 8, but it was a heart-wrenching phone call, and I cried for hours, devastated not being able to say goodbye to her one last time. But after the funeral, the first thing that popped into my head was that little girl in the cemetery and what she had said. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt connected, like somehow she'd known. I haven't driven on that road since, and I can't even bring myself to go near that cemetery. Now, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe to get it off my chest, or maybe because I need someone to believe me. I swear this is true, and I don't care if you think I'm messing around or whatever, but I'm telling you, don't mess with things you don't understand, especially not the dead. So, the other night, me and my friends, Ryan, Jake, and Lucas, were all hanging out like usual. We were bored, and someone, I think it was Lucas, suggested that we do something exciting for once. That's when Ryan mentioned the cemetery. It's this old, creepy place on the outskirts of our town, not too far from where we live. Of course, being the idiots that we are, we thought it'd be fun to sneak in there, smoke some cigarettes, and have a few laughs. It was around midnight when we finally hopped the fence and started wandering around. The place was even creepier than I remembered from when I was younger. The gravestones were old and covered in moss, some leaning over like they were about to collapse. The whole place just felt wrong. But we were being stupid, not taking anything seriously. Jake cracked some jokes about how spooky it was, and we all laughed like we didn't have a care in the world. We found a spot near the center of the cemetery, sat on the ground, and started smoking. The conversation was the same as always. School sucks, parents suck, life sucks, whatever. We were just killing time, really. Then, out of nowhere, Ryan dared me to do something. He pointed to this old gravestone that looked like it was barely holding on. "I bet you won't kick that over," he said, smirking like the asshole that he was. The others joined in, egging me on, telling me not to be a wimp. I didn't want to do it. Honestly, I didn't. But I also didn't want to look like a coward in front of my friends. So I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked over to the gravestone. I hesitated for a second, but they kept pushing me, saying I was scared. So I did it. I kicked the gravestone as hard as I could, and it toppled over with this loud, crackling sound. The thing just broke apart like it was nothing. We all started laughing, but it wasn't real laughter. It was the kind of forced laughter you do when you're trying to cover up the fact that you actually did something messed up. I could tell the others were a little spooked too, even though no one said anything. We did not stick around after that. We put out our cigarettes and got the hell out of there, trying to act cool but definitely walking faster than normal. I thought that would be the end of it, just a stupid thing we did one night that we'd all forget about in weeks. But the next morning, things got strange. I woke up, went downstairs, and saw my parents standing by the front door, looking confused and a little freaked out. My mom turned to me and asked if I knew anything about the joke someone had pulled. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I walked over to the door, and that's when I saw it. There, right on our front porch, was the gravestone I had kicked over last night. The exact same one, down to the last crack. My stomach dropped, and it felt like I was going to be sick. I tried to play dumb, telling my parents I had no clue how that got there, but I could tell they did not believe me. Honestly, I didn't even believe me. I don't know how that gravestone ended up at my house. Do you know how heavy gravestones are? They're like hundreds of pounds. I don't know who could have done it or why, but I have this feeling that we messed up. Like, really messed up. And now weird things have been happening to us. Things will start going missing randomly. Sometimes at night, I swear I see figures in the corner of my room staring at me. But when I turn on the light, nothing is there. I'm terrified I've upset some spirit by being an asshole. I don't know what's going to happen next. I have this horrible feeling in my gut that this isn't the end and the spirit wants revenge. And that scares the hell out of me.